Getting some level of data, getting some level of granularity is really important. You have to literally have to call your water utility. We all have sustainability goals. Some are very public. Typically, these days, big corporations have big public goals. Sustainability is one of those magic words that can mean anything, and it means something different to everybody. But these days, and I guess the good news that comes along with the climate and all this work is that every company has sustainability goals, even small companies now. Everyone has this awareness about the climate, about their impact, about what they're doing with their business, about trying to minimize the negative impacts for whatever it is that they're doing. We all have sustainability goals. Some are very public. Typically, these days, big corporations have big public goals. They're going to be net zero by 2030, or they're going to do this by 2025. But now corporations are using water to do the same thing. Microsoft, for example, this past year has come out with big, huge, pervasive water goals that says they're going to completely neutralize their water footprint across their entire operations, which is phenomenal. I love these goals. But now you've said it, right? You've put goals out into the public, and sustainability goals are very interesting because the goal of them is to support the brand, in many cases, build the brand. Microsoft is actually using these goals to build their brand. But the biggest thing is you don't want to have your brand erode. You don't want to take a really big swing and then miss publicly, because then really bad things happen. When Coca-Cola goes into a new market, and Coca-Cola is a beverage company, they sell liquid. When they go out there into the world and they say, we are going to be a zero water impact company, and if they miss that, people protest in the streets and they become an internet meme, and you can actually pull them up and see them. It's not good. A sustainability director's job is to, yes, support the brand, yes, hopefully build it, but you got to really be careful to not make a fool of yourself in the public. Greenwashing is a very real thing. You can't say stuff publicly and then try to take credit for stuff that didn't happen. Water is a really big one. That's what's been going on. The good news, again, is sustainability goals are front and center, and now corporations are using water to support and build up their brand, which is fantastic. These goals are made, and then they hand them to sustainability directors, and then they say, now go make this happen. And ooh, yikes, what do you do? How do you meet those goals? Pretty tough with water, especially, because what are your choices? You can go out into the community and try to restore watersheds, and it's exactly like it sounds. It's tractors over at a riverbed trying to make sure that the land doesn't erode and that you maintain the integrity of that water basin. But think about that. If you're Coca-Cola, you're hiring tractors to go out into a field. You're not actually increasing any operational efficiency. You're just doing it to be a good water steward and to be a good community steward. You're trying to get public relations points, if you will, to do that, and you cross your fingers that it works. But these are millions of dollars. I think since 2020, Microsoft has spent $7 to $10 million doing various watershed restoration projects. Really expensive. It has nothing to do with their business, but they do it to earn some public goodwill. Another option that they have is they can go out and try to find new sources of water, but we're in California. We've been in a permanent drought. How many states have only one source of water? It's called the Colorado River. There's not more Colorado rivers. So we're all increasingly stressed with trying to run our businesses and run our lives using that same water source. So finding new sources of water is not really an option because you just can't. So you do what most companies do, which is you just start making operational improvements. You improve your efficiency. You start replacing your pipes with more efficient pipes. You replace the valves, and you do all of these things that you can do and that you can afford to try to manage your water footprint. And that's what they do. It's expensive. It takes away from operations. It's redoing your plant to minimize your water footprint. These are the choices that you have in order to meet these big public goals. We've got 8 billion people and not enough clean water. That is, without getting into any of the geopolitical, that's just the basic. It's true with climate in general anyway. It was just too many people using too much stuff. With water, it's the same. We've got too many people needing access to clean water. If you're a business, of course, you need water to run your operations. And if you're a beverage company, you sell water in whatever form that you can get it. It's the lifeblood of your business, and it's the lifeblood of really everything that we do. When you live in a state like California, drought is a way of life. It changes the way you live. I personally have removed all the grass in my backyard so I didn't have to water anymore. We take actions in order to minimize our impact and minimize the effect that it's going to have. A lack of water is just fundamental. And managing that, and certainly as corporations, minimizing the risk and being better water stewards, it's not just a branding thing, it's actually you have to do it in order to run your business. I'll give you an example here in San Luis Obispo, where I'm from. Developers wanted to come in and build new homes, but they couldn't get the permits because the permitting agency was saying, where do you get your water from? How are you going to get enough water for these 200 homes? They couldn't find any new sources of water. So what they did was they said, hey, I will go throughout the community and replace all of those old toilets with new water efficient ones at their own expense. And they did that. They just rang doorbells. Hey, would you like a free toilet? And everyone said, sure, of course. And those toilets saved 50 gallons a day. They totaled that up over time. And they said, all right, we've saved enough water to be able to get the permits for the homes that we want to build. And that's exactly what happened. That was the only way that they could make it work. Managing water and managing access to water is a very real-time thing. We talked a bit about the watershed restoration, and it's not really solving the water issue. It's more of solving the perception of a water issue. It's solving the public perceptions of how your company is managing the local watershed. That's one thing that companies do. Finding sources of water is not really an option because you can't. Replacing valves, becoming more water efficient. Sometimes you'll change your operations to move shifts around so it's less of a water burden. You'll do that just like you do with your energy usage. Those are some of the things that people try. Sometimes they will produce less things, or sometimes they will offload some of their requirements onto their supply chain. They'll require their supply chain to do more of the labor and really take more of the water burden and the footprint onto them so they don't have to account for it themselves. You can only streamline your operations so much. I've done extensive interviews with sustainability directors of large corporations, and there was one quote that always stood out to me, and the director said, you can't conserve your way to zero. So no matter what you do, if you're making something, you can't get to energy neutral, you can't get to water neutral. It's impossible. You can't. You're making stuff. You're using things, you're transforming them into something else. You have a footprint. It's a bit of an impossible goal when the company says, hey, we're going to be water neutral. If you're Coca-Cola, if you're Pepsi, we sell water. How are you going to do that? It's impossible. The way that you do that is you manage it in other ways, and you try to move that around, and you try to limit your exposure in different areas. And that's really the system and the way that we have approached solving this particular problem. And my background is the energy markets. I think I sold my first solar panel in 1999. I've spent a few decades really developing energy products, cleaner energy products for sustainability directors, and living in this world for a long time. So there's only so much that you can do, but with water in particular, it's a very physical presence. Energy is ethereal. You can buy credits from someone in Brazil and use them and take credit for them here in California. But with water, you can't. It's a physical, local thing. It limits you in many ways, but in a lot of ways, it has limited your thinking and how you solve a water problem. People think, I got to solve this water problem myself. And that's one of the things that we're trying to do different with Liquid8 is we want to borrow and leverage some of the concepts that have worked really well in the energy markets to help people think about water, not just inside your building, but within your community, and leveraging other people and other homes and other businesses to help you meet your goals. That's one of the big things that we were doing with Liquid8. One of the interesting things about water is, even though it's a local, physical, tangible thing, it's really hard to figure out how much water you use. And that's amazing. And you don't know that until you actually get into it. If you pay your water bill, you're like most people, you just look, $80 and you write a check, or you click on your payment system and it goes and you do it. But you have to really look at it to really understand it. So if you look at a water bill, you're not billed by gallons, even though you use gallons. You're billed by these things called units. And the water utilities, and it's an acre foot of water, and that translates, I think, into one unit, I think is 748 gallons, but you can never see that from your utility bill. If someone says, hey, how many gallons of water do you use a day? You don't know. And your utility bill will not tell you that. You have to do this weird mental calculation, and in many cases you won't know. You can start saving water, but you really won't know if you've actually saved water, because you could be saving hundreds of gallons of water and it won't make one difference to your water bill. So that's really weird. You want to be able to conserve water, but you really don't know how to do that. That's an issue, is how much water do I use and what kind of insight do I need in order to make any effective change? So that's a big one. That's getting some transparency into your actual water usage, into the bills, into what actually is happening in your house, how many gallons a day do I use, let alone how many gallons of water do I use between 7 and 8 a.m. in the morning and things like that. Getting some level of data, getting some level of granularity is really important. You have to literally call your water utility. And it's a little bit of a wrestling match, because if you've ever worked with utilities before, they are not incentivized to be transparent with all of this stuff, even though you can get it. But it actually took me a lot of effort to figure out how many gallons of water I use. Who's going to do this? Who's going to really dig into it? And at some point I just want the information. So I dug into it like a dog on a bone, and I got it, but I was like, wow, that was really hard. Now imagine trying to make systemic changes do that. Who's going to do that? No one's going to do that. People don't. It's just too hard to get that level of transparency to figure out how much water you actually use. Utilities in general have an interesting business model. Since I come from the energy market, utilities make their money not on the product that they sell you, they make their money on the infrastructures. There is motivation, for example, in the electricity market here in California. Yes, we have a lot of solar installations, but the utilities, the only reason they really are doing it is because the Public Utilities Commission, the politicians have told them that if you don't do this, we're going to fine you. And it's a lot of money, because if you install a bunch of solar, it takes the stress off of existing plants. The plants will last longer. They don't need to be maintained as much. The utilities don't like that, because they like to replace plants, because they need those plants to go obsolete so they can build brand new ones, because then they can take a rates-based percentage as their return on that new building. They need stuff to break, they need stuff to replace. They're not allowed to make a profit on the electricity because it's a public good. Same with the water. It's just the business model. Now, are we going to transform the way that utilities make their money? Probably a good idea, but that's a political thing, and that takes decades to happen, especially with water. Water is a very slow-moving political environment. Yes, they have conservation goals. They will help you save water, but they're negatively incentivized for a lot of this stuff. And it's just the way that utilities operate. If there's any other topics you want to hear about that we didn't cover in our talk today, please leave a comment.